So today we have a number of people here that we're going to talk. Stacy, right? He's waiting on it actually. I love this guy. I talked to him, you know, last night, and I think it was for the first like 30 seconds or so, right? And we hadn't talked before. We were going to meet up and maybe have a little summer supper, but he got stuck in Henry County and decided that was a good place to hang out for a while on the way. I think we all practiced that. We have Jessica, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow Wendy, each of the speakers have about 7 or 8, 10 minutes or so to introduce themselves. And I'll allow them to introduce themselves. So we have Jessica next.
Hi everyone, I'm from YKK. If you are not sure what YKK manufactures, take a look at your pants. Not right now. Not right now. You may notice little YKK letters, and we're actually the largest zipper manufacturer in the world. We make 10.3 billion zippers per year, and headquartered in Japan. And just a little bit of background on me. I actually came into this role. I'm Vice President of Community Engagement and Corporate Communications, but I came into this role because my job requires knowledge of Japanese language. So I first went to Japan when I was 14 years old, and I've spent approximately 5 years living in Japan and about 25 years trying to master the language. You know, for those of you who studied it, either Japanese or Chinese, so learning to read and write is quite challenging. But now, you know, I get to have this great international role where I get to work with my colleagues in Japan and all over the world every day using Japanese and various other languages as well. So thanks for having me today. And thank you, Miguel, also always for putting on a fantastic conference.
Next we have Wendy Liu.
My name is Wendy Liu from AFU. First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Lei Gao and Dr. Peterson, and also, of course, KSU, the university that I actually graduated for me 2 years. I'm a tax partner in AFU and mainly service Chinese inbound company in the United States. And AFU, if you don't know us, we are one of the 35 top CPA and business advisory firm in the country. And we saw this client from about more than 40 countries by now. So it's really an international firm. And I'm very happy to service our client in that field, and happy to be here, and we can share more information later.
Bill Strand, if you don't know what Total does, were you going to do that as your lead-in?
So, hi guys, I'm Bill Strand. I'm President of Corporate Strategy, E-commerce, and Retail for a company called Toto. Now, if you don't know Toto, don't look at your pants. Look at your pants, let them down. Buy products. This is a toilet. And wash it when you go to the bathroom. So we actually have a product that we manufacture here in Atlanta, Georgia, factories in the southern part of Atlanta. We manufacture in our main factory about 20,000 toilets a month in that factory. In that factory, in fact, we have 40 nationalities, 7 languages on the factory floor. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to speak to you here as part of this organization and part of what Kennesaw puts on this program. So thank you, Dr. John, for actually continuing this program. But the very important part of this is the interconnectivity that we have as business leaders and business engagements. As an example, Stacy on the end, Port Authority. We bring our products into the Port Authority. YKK, we're partners at the Japan American Society and partners with a Japanese company, which Toto is as well. With Wendy, I actually do speaking engagements with Next Generation Manufacturing, which is part of Caprio. How we all get connected is just random because we work together to be in the community and telling the story of what our businesses do. So as we go through today, I'm looking forward to sharing some of the stories and ideas that Toto's had over the past couple of years, and it's been rather dynamic. Thank you.
And then I'll let Stacey introduce himself for a few moments, and then we can kick things off.
Well, I'm Stacey Watson. I'm the director of economic and industrial development at the Georgia Ports Authority. And the Georgia Ports Authority, we ship a lot of YKK zippers and we ship a lot of toilets. So we are the enabler of international freight, international transportation for lots of companies. And honestly, we do the majority of our business with both Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. Just looking at our statistics right before walking in, about 35% of our business is China, and the remainder, Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, makes up about 60% of our business. So thank you for having me here, a very important sector for us to, the Georgia Ports, to present and just get our story out there. And a little bit about the Georgia Ports, you may not know, but we're a pretty big deal down in Savannah. We are the third busiest container port in the United States at the Garden City Terminal. Everybody know what the TEU is before I start? Because you'll probably hear me say that a few times. I know you're. Well, containers come in 3 different lengths. You got 20-foot containers, ocean-going containers, 40 feet and 45 feet. So TEU means 20-foot equivalent unit. All right. So one 20-foot container is 1 TEU, and a 40-foot container would be 2 TEU. So in Savannah, we move the equivalent of 5.6 million TEUs on an annual basis. Again, the third busiest container port in the United States on one facility, actually the largest container complex, my boss would say, in the Western Hemisphere, but I haven't confirmed that, so I'll just say North America at over 1,350 acres. The top 2 would be Los Angeles, Long Beach, and they do about 20 million TEUs. And New York and New Jersey at about 8 to 8.5 million TEUs. So you've got a great resource for international freight, for logistics. I like to say in your backyard, about 4-hour drive down I-75, down I-16. You don't get stopped in Henry County. So it's a pleasure to be here. And look forward to the conversation.
So let me say, I spent some time at the JW down at the waterfront recently, and I was looking out onto this shipping way, and I can tell you it was busy. It didn't stop like they managed it better there than Henry County, but it was like standing on the side of the motorway, just watching the ships going up and down. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give each of the panelists 7 or 8 minutes just to unpack around some of the issues of supply chain bottlenecks, reshoring, and environmental issues. And what we'll do is we'll start with Bill at the other end of the table, and we'll work our way down.
So Toto has a strategy of localization. We actually have manufacturing facilities here in the United States. We made that decision early on in our 35 years in the United States. Now, Toto is one of the 225 industry companies on the Nikkei in Japan. So we are 65, 70% of the captain business in Japan, and we're the Microsoft of that. So what we want to make sure of is that we bring that idea, those concepts, those products, those offerings into the United States. We want to find success. The greatest way to find success with a plumber is actually be physically present. And having a manufacturing facility in Atlanta, Georgia was ideal. It's ideal in many reasons. Number one, because of the logistics opportunities that are here. Hartsfield Airport, and combined with Savannah Port, was an important decision for being in Atlanta. Secondly, what's important for us as well is we get our kale and clays from Macon up to Augusta. In that range, most of it comes from Sandersville, Georgia. We bring our clays in. We also have the opportunity of having a wonderfully diverse workforce, as I mentioned earlier. 40 nationalities, 7 languages. We are a microcosm of this United States. What's equally important is we're able to bring clever and innovative technologies from Japan that have never been experienced in the United States. And it runs the gamut from soft close toilet seats, which you wouldn't have thought that was a deal. But once we bought a soft close toilet seat and it don't slam, everyone wanted one. And that helped us grow our marketplace. Toilets that work really well, flushing even lower volumes, as well as you may be aware of the Toto washlet bidet. Who's ever had a chance to test drive a washlet bidet? If you haven't test driven one of these, you must sit down and test drive it. It will absolutely change your life. You will walk away with a, oh my God, this is wonderful. But what is also key about this is during the pandemic, during the March 2020, March 10th, in fact, of 2020, during the pandemic, when everyone was looking for, oh my God, lockdown, I need to buy toilet paper, we ran into an opportunity. What was previously an item that you were familiar with at the day, a washlet, traveled internationally, you had the experience of actually seeing that product become the 20th most searched item on Amazon. Only after hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, and toilet paper. And we actually became, with 138 million Prime members at that time, the 20th most searched item, everybody knew what the day was. Our sales went through the roof, and we've been just blowing through it since then. So it's been wonderful. Our sales are wonderful. We're seeing great opportunities. What's also equally important here is those plumbers who were advocates for us in the past continue to be. But a new cohort is coming online, and that new cohort is the online buyer, the digitally native millennials who are very familiar and comfortable with buying products online, sight unseen. What's really important for them is not just a good performing product with great reviews, but also your ability to tell a sustainability message associated with that. And as a result of that sustainability initiative, 12 years ago, Toto launched a program at Toto USA to actually have a carbon footprint for a toilet. We can define for a toilet and for a washlet a carbon footprint. This means that we identified and measured every aspect of the use phase, manufacturing, and all aspects of that product to identify where carbon is being consumed and used. As a result of that, not only do we have the hearts of the plumbers, we have the hearts of the millennials who make decisions on the ethical and ESG characteristics of the business that you work with and want to buy from in the future. This is important to how we move into the future of our work. If you're not doing that, you don't understand what's going on in the marketplace, and that's important for all of us. And for reshoring, we continue not only to onshore, but reshore on and on as we go into the future, because even though we love the Port Authority for Savannah, we don't want to be struggling with the cyclicality of the challenges within the marketplace. So I'll leave it at that and go on to this one.
Let me share some of the information that my clients shared with me during these pandemic and supply chain challenges. So I think all of you guys know in the past 2.5 years, and the supply chain industry has endured a perfect storm. Everything just come together. Like pandemic itself, talent shortage, port congestion, freight costs like skyrocketing, I don't know, even 3-fold or 10-fold of the regular price. And also that comes to the geopolitical issues like tariff war, US-China tensions all the time, and now we have this Russia-Ukraine war and sanctions. It's all come together. The perfect storm is still ongoing. So what my clients do, they just like Toto, I'm sure would like it too. They be thinking, remodeling their business model. They're thinking either resourcing or outsourcing, and some people say should be reshoring. So what I have seen at my client, a lot of my clients, they are energy clients, manufacturing and wholesale logistic transportation clients, and they are moving their facilities to Asia, the Southeast Asian country, the Asian region. A lot of them moved their manufacturing facilities over there. So there's a lot of changes. So these changes would have tax implications. So that's my job, right? To help my client to maintain a global tax obligation that's structured efficiently. So what we do during the past 2 years to help our clients to at least maintain their profit level is we look at their existing business model and the existing ownership structure and see what needs to be changed to kind of cope with what they have changed in the supply chain. And then we look at the pricing policy. Particularly, we serve a lot of multinational M&T clients, so we look at the related party transaction, the pricing, and look at each steps on the supply chain and the purchase price and how they allocate the overheads, royalty or management fee, things like that. There's a lot of planning room for tax purposes to maintain their global tax effective rate level. And we also look for additional deduction for a client. To benefit from that, one of the deductions that my client benefit from is the FDII deduction. Those are the incentivize the company that have export activity. So if you sell products or service to a foreign person and for a foreign use, you likely, and it's a C corporation, and you make profit, and likely you're eligible to FDII. So think about that. And it's an additional deduction that basically reduces your tax by 37%, 37.5% to be more accurate, on your export net income. So, things like that, we look at each small pieces, you would say, but small things add up, then get your global tax effective rate low. And this is very important, very critical, particular in a rising interest rate environment. You gotta keep your operating costs low as much as possible. Keep your money that's sent to the Uncle Sam as much as low, so you manage the business in a sustainable way. Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to talk about this topic. There's so many comments that I think I can make, but YPK has been around for 88 years now, and we have a philosophy called the cycle of goodness, which says that no one prospers without rendering benefit to others. So what that basically means is that when we invest in a community, it is in order to serve the customer in that community. But that, once we are in a community, we're going to do everything we can to try to reinvest, with technology into providing better value for the customer, invest into the community, and invest in our employees. And so because of that, YPK's business model has been to set up operations, manufacturing operations everywhere that our customer is. So we actually started manufacturing outside of Japan in 1959, which is actually quite early for Japanese companies, and we now operate in 70 countries around the world. So our commitment to our stakeholders from that point of view hasn't changed at all in the past 88 years, but still the reality is that we have really faced some challenges that the founder of YPK never could have anticipated back when he founded the company. And so first, I really want to talk about globalization of supply chains and how that has affected our business. So, as I said, when we commit to setting up manufacturing in a location, it's because there are customers there. So YPK actually has a factory down in Macon, Georgia, which opened up in 1974. And the reason that that company was established there was because there were over 59 brand name jeans manufacturers located right around the Southeast, throughout the Southeast. And back at that time, 95% of the apparel that people purchased in the United States was manufactured in the United States. We actually had practically a pipeline just pumping out zippers and sending them directly to our customer. But in the 1990s, the US-based apparel manufacturers began to face really stiff competition from cheaper imports. And they were really starting to flood the market. And looking to reduce their own labor costs, all of these jeans manufacturers and then all the other apparel manufacturers began closing their US factories, and they started using offshore subcontractors. So by the mid-2000s, every single one of those jeans plants had actually closed. What that meant was all of our customers, pretty much all of our customers, disappeared out of the United States. And in fact, today, just 2% of the apparel that people buy in the United States is manufactured in the United States. So, this the apparel industry shift from US-based supply chain to global supply chains actually did not affect YPK globally. If your production of your jeans shifts from Georgia to Bangladesh, YPK is still fine because we have a factory in Bangladesh. So everything's very global. We are wherever our customers are. But, and maybe you as a consumer, you might be happy about that because now you're purchasing a pair of jeans for $20 rather than $100. So all good, right? But the impact on the local level of this kind of shift actually was devastating for our business. So our sales, this happened probably within a 5-year period. It was practically like plummeted overnight. It was really hard for our leaders at the time to try to figure out, first of all, what was happening. It was very hard to see what was happening at the beginning. And then when they realized that the customers were gone and they were never coming back, we had to really pivot and find brand new industries that are going to stay in the United States. And had to ask our our employees to really sacrifice. They had to take pay cuts and benefits cuts. And I always remember the story of one employee who begged our CEO at the time, Alex Gregory. She came up to him and said, "Just do whatever you need to do to save my job." So, of course, we have our cycle of goodness philosophy, and it really was not an option to try to close the company. Not going to close the company, so we had to go out and try to find new business, new innovations. And today we don't in the United States, actually, despite me might tell you to look at your pants, we don't manufacture all that many zippers for pants in the US. We're manufacturing zippers for spacesuits, for things like highly technical, government applications, the medical industry, PPE, safety, outdoor, really, again, highly technical products. So anyway, YPK is continuing to adapt, and we're actually going to be fine. But the bigger question that I would like to pose to all of you today as consumers, and I'm posing this question to myself as well, is whether being able to buy a garment for $10 on your phone just moments after it walked down the runway, is it really worth the true cost? And I just told you, one example was job loss here in the United States, but the environment is another huge cost to this shift. So I want to share a couple of statistics with you. This actually comes from McKinsey. Clothing production has actually doubled in the world since 2000. And in 2014, people bought 60% more garments than they did in 2000. But they only keep the clothes half as long, and the equivalent of one garbage truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in a landfill every second. The fashion industry produces 10% of humanity's carbon emissions, and it's the second largest consumer of the world's water supply. So did you know that it takes 1,800 gallons of water to make a single pair of jeans? So that's really a steep price to pay for our, how much we're in love with cheap clothing. Now, I'm saying this to you as somebody who's actually working in this industry, and it's the good news that I do want to share is the industry, especially in the past couple of years, has really started to come together to try to work on this collectively. So I do want to tell you a couple of things that we are working on, but again, facing huge challenges. So in 2018, there was at the UN Climate Change Conference, the fashion industry came together to sign the Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action. YPK was one of the early signatories. I'm very proud of that. It's now been signed by 110 major apparel companies, and it is aiming for 30% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and achieving climate neutrality by 2050. So, YPK as part of this industry, and especially as a key part of the supply chain, we have thousands of customers all over the world. We really feel that it's part of, we have a tremendous responsibility to help our customers solve this environmental problem. So we actually have had an environmental charter back since 1994 and a sustainable product since 1994. But recently, we've just really been ramping up our efforts and working together with our customers to help them achieve their goals. So we, in 2020, we established our sustainability vision, and we have our own roadmap. We are going to cut our emissions in half by 2030, and we also have committed to achieving climate neutrality by 2050. And those emission targets were last year approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative, which we were really excited about getting that approved. And we're actually investing 2.5 billion yen in sustainability initiatives over the next 4 years. And some of the really exciting things we're working on, basically every zipper that is in apparel is going to be made, YPK zipper is going to be made of 100% sustainable materials within the near future. We're also working on packaging. When we send our huge amounts of zippers to our customers, it's in plastic, getting rid of the plastic packaging. A really big, being sustainable when you're a manufacturer is quite difficult. There's a lot of things that go into our process. We use a lot of water and unfortunately have to use a lot of chemicals as well. So some of our key initiatives are around reducing water usage, getting rid of all these hazardous chemicals that are going into our products. And we also have a whole bunch of brand new products that are, again, like we're trying to help our customers make their products more sustainable. So one example that I like, we have a plant-based product called Green Rise. It's actually made from sugar cane, like originally, is like how it's produced. And we have a product made from ocean-bound plastic, so the plastic that's been reclaimed from the ocean. We have a new metal plating technology, which 100% eliminates all of the hazardous substances that was originally used for metal plating. And then the other thing I just want to talk a little bit about is supply chain transparency as well. So we are also working not only on, we are part of the supply chain, right? So our customers ask us for tons of information about what we're doing, but then we have to audit our own supply chains, because if you think about the big, global customers, many of them are not actually manufacturing their own products. They're relying on subcontractors all over the world. So we're a really important component of that, because how can a big global apparel manufacturer say that their products are sustainable without 100% knowing what is going into the product when they're using various companies and various subcontractors? So that's something that we're working on a lot as well, is to make sure there's a lot of transparency into that. And then the last thing, about the reshoring or nearshoring, that is a topic that we're really following very closely. As I mentioned before, YPK pretty much has manufacturing, in all the major countries around the world. So we actually have not really been all that adversely affected by some of the supply chain bottlenecks that you've heard about. But we are really, really curious about what will happen with the apparel industry in this hemisphere. So we've been hearing lots of talk in the past year. There's actually, McKinsey found that 71% of apparel companies are planning to increase their nearshoring share by 2050. And while we don't expect a whole lot of that will come back to the United States, Central America has a lot of excitement around it right now. And so, we're definitely excited to hear that. We have factories, of course, in Central America ready to serve that when it comes up. But that'll be exciting to watch. So anyway, it remains very uncertain what's going to happen with the shifts in the supply chain within the apparel industry, but what YPK right now is focusing on is, instead of talking about volumes, we're really focusing on trying to provide the right material in the right amount at the right time and as sustainably as possible.
Perfect. Well, when you hear of bottlenecks in supply chain, I take it a little bit personally. Right before Christmas, there was a meme going around with, here comes Santa Claus. He was actually swimming out to sea toward a vessel, a ship, to get all his packages out. It's like the port system was ruining Christmas for kids. But yes, the past couple of years have been an issue for our port, just as every other port in the United States. What we expected post-COVID was not what we actually received, or not how we actually performed. Our fiscal years run from July to June. So, we have to start our budgets in the February, March, April time frame, and that is the time when we're in the depths of COVID, the lockdown. What we planned for was about a 12% decline in our business for that next fiscal year. Well, we grew by about 20%. And with a port, it's not like you can flip a switch and just add additional capacity. So it took us a little bit by surprise, especially considering, no one predicted. We talked to economists, we talked to the ocean carriers, we talked to the shippers. Yes, our business will be down. Yes, our business will be down. But people, staying home. Again, you've heard this several times. E-commerce took a huge, huge jump. I think the e-commerce sales, even the warehousing that's needed to support e-commerce took like a 10% growth factor over where they were supposed to be at that particular time during COVID or immediately following COVID. We had to become very, very creative in some of the things that we did. If you look at a port is designed to move freight. A port isn't really designed to store freight. So the issue with the warehouses actually not having the workforce or the capability to offload the volumes of freight that they had ordered that were destined to their facilities actually created like a domino effect. Those containers were sitting on our port with no ability, no capability of a company coming in to pick it up. When we're at about 80, 90% capacity, that creates gridlock on our facilities, on any container facility. So we were designed to store about 85,000 containers on our terminal. We got very, very close to that 80 to 85 containers. That's a snapshot of the number of containers that actually sit on our facility. Dwell times for ocean-going containers. Again, we like to move freight. We don't like to store it. I made a mistake one time of saying, we don't make money storing freight. We made a lot of money storing some freight over the last couple of years. Probably some of your freight. But dwell times for containers for a truck move, for a truck to come in and pick up or drop off container. Pre-COVID was about 4 days. Okay, and that's a good cycle. We keep the freight moving. Well, post-COVID, that number went up to 11, 12 days. Problem number one, big problem. We can offload those containers very expeditiously if you would. We have 30 ship-to-shore cranes on our terminal, and each one of those cranes can move between 30 and 35 pitch per hour. So we can offload the containers very fast, but those containers weren't going out of the gate as fast as we could unload them. Again, that's a problem with every port saw. So we had to meter to keep our productivity, to keep our efficiency up on the facility. We had to meter what was coming off the vessel with what was going out the gate. And that is typically where your backlog of vessels that are sitting out in ocean, that are at anchor, that's where it starts. During the peak of the COVID bottleneck, we were up to about 30 ships at anchor. And I'm proud to say as of yesterday, we were down to 5. And that's kind of high for us. We're actually down to 1 and 2, so we're almost back to normal. But, Los Angeles, Long Beach, don't want to pick on those guys, but there is, as of yesterday, there were 90 ships at anchor waiting to be offloaded. All right, Charleston, I think there were maybe 15. New York, New Jersey, there was 25. So we do still have issues with vessels at anchor, with that log jam of vessels that are actually waiting to come into port for that freight to be offloaded. Reshoring, really quickly, just give you a good case in point. We've seen this happen in the past with, you know, everybody knows Walmart. You know, they're our single largest shipper or customer, and at just about every port that they operate, they're the largest customer. So they have this issue or this movement for Made in America. And I went to a couple of their conferences where they were promoting this to all their suppliers. In all actuality, it did not affect our port very much, if any, at all. You know, we saw more components and parts and pieces that go into a product or consumer good actually coming through our facilities, and it also created export opportunities for us as well. So nearshoring, you know, reshoring, not as big of an issue for a port as you would think. The nearshoring component, you know, again, we do about 30% of our business, 35% of our business with China. So we're seeing a lot of that volume kind of slip down to Vietnam, to Thailand, to India. But, you know, China's always going to be China. You know, there's just not the infrastructure around the world to support as much manufacturing capacity as China has. So what we're seeing happening is China plus. You know, China plus India, China plus Thailand, China plus Vietnam. So the nearshoring, reshoring portion, you know, I feel that we're kind of balanced on that, but definitely still we have some bottlenecks and some restraints that we're going to have to overcome as a country.
So I have a quick question for Stacy. You talked about how much is coming into the port in terms of volume. How much is leaving, maybe as a percentage?
Great question. Great question. That is one of the many advantages that we have at Port of Savannah. We are a fairly balanced port as far as our import-export ratio. Right now, for loaded containers, we're probably 60% import, 40% export. Georgia is blessed to have an abundance of export commodities. Say, for instance, anything you can manufacture from a Georgia pine tree, we export it. The resins, the paper, pulp, it's actually going out, being produced into a finished good, coming back as an import. You mentioned the kaolin clay. We export lots of kaolin clay from up in the middle Georgia area, Sandersville, Macon, Dublin, Georgia area. Cotton, staple goods going out. Poultry. From up in North Georgia, we're actually the top poultry or top refrigerated container export port in the United States. So very balanced port, and that is very good for us because ocean carriers, just like a truck, they want freight for the head haul and back haul. They want freight for both ways. And there's opportunity for loaded containers inbound and outbound.
So I have a quick question from the group as a whole. So how long do you believe the pandemic will continue to be an issue with global supply chains? You know, Stacey mentioned something such as causing delays and also with materials relative to the nearshoring and onshoring. Who wants to start? Stacey, you want to mic first.
Well, I'll be quick
down the line
because
that's not the mic.
You know, we're seeing some trends right now that are a little bit, you know, I would say disturbing. You know, if you'd asked me 4 or 5 months ago, I would say we will start seeing some normalcy by the end of 2022. But there are further lockdowns in Shanghai now, and that's where we do a lot of business. So, you know, I don't know. You know, that's I'll leave that up to the experts. Yeah. There's the expert right there.
So our experience has been first thing what Stacey said. Frankly speaking, when ships, we bring products out of, as he mentioned, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. Virtually all of those stop in Shanghai. They stop to drop off stuff and pick up stuff. When Shanghai locks down, it jacks up the whole supply chain because then the carriers got to reroute, and it's a problem. So the challenge that we have as a business is making sure that we understand clearly the opportunities that are out there for us to be nimble in our reaction to that. It doesn't look like, to me, as though we're going to be out of this situation of COVID impact until sometime mid to late 23. I believe we'll get back to a quote unquote normal situation. But then even that normal will become what is now normal, and then normal will be upcoming normal. It'll be different than it is today. And a lot's going to come because many of the companies that I just went and talked to are actually reconfiguring their entire supply chain logic to mitigate the challenges of cyclicality characteristics of the supply chain that
I know that we're looking at this from an accounting and tax perspective. So all these bottlenecks, all this pandemic, and would cause inflation. So, and a lot of my clients don't see a turnaround. Inflation until don't know maybe 3 or 4 weeks. So at Apio, we closely monitor the whole income outlook, and we publish a inflation playbook and offer solutions to clients to navigate the inflation. So we publish these inflation playbook each quarter. So if you are interested, come talk to me or go to our booth. We have a table outside. I will give you a copy.
At least as far as the apparel industry is concerned, I mean, there's still a lot of challenges, and especially like volatility in demand, and there's also the logistics issues and the raw material supply chain disruption, and so we really don't see those issues resolving very soon, and wondering if some of these changes are permanent. But one thing we are watching very, very closely is the role that technology is going to play in this, especially e-commerce, and you were talking about e-commerce as well. Those of you who are either from China or have teenage children in your house like I do, you will know of the company Shein. And Shein has a very innovative business model, which is advertising pretty much exclusively to teenagers on TikTok, and then having the apparel being ordered and then going directly to the factory, immediately into production, and being shipped to the United States or wherever else in the world in small packages right from the plant. So not using, the Georgia port, or just being shipped to like the regular postal service. And that is, for the apparel industry, like a complete change in how the business is done. And so we have like a lot of questions about how successful they would be. They're getting ready for their IPO. I think they were valued at $100 billion just a couple of days ago. They are larger than Zara, H&M combined. So that company was not in existence, I believe, like 10 years ago.
So I think we have time for some questions from the audience. Let me say, I apologize for the noise next door. We tried to get things shifted around. We have brought in a tambourine and a xylophone, so we do need to play some stuff ourselves. We can create our own noise to do, but apologize for any noise you hear next door. It's unexpected. So, questions? Yes, we got one at the back. Please introduce yourself at the same time.
Hi, hello, my name is Tom. Just to say, first of all, thanks for the really engaging dialogue there, really enjoyed it. All of you leading organizations that are plugged into cross-border trade, right? So what I want to ask the panel is, although reshoring might be a necessary response to the supply chain bottlenecks that we've been seeing over the past year or so, do you think reshoring is beneficial or actually harmful to your profitability or the profitability of your clients?
Very reshoring, bringing product manufacturing back to the United States. At this moment, when we're paying $22,000 for a container to come across is beneficial. How much longer will that be? It won't be forever. It will actually go down. Costs actually be more capable of having product coming in from Asia. And building a manufacturing facility, make toilets is a long process. It's kilns, it's equipment, it's all kinds of things. So I believe there's going to be some moderation of what is both reshoring and nearshoring. We will actually take our current facilities, beef them up a little bit, make them look stronger, bigger. But what will happen is will be a balanced portfolio of manufacturing sites and capabilities across the entire biosphere of Toto from our standpoint of where we manufacture products. Where it makes sense in low cost items that are fairly commodity products, they'll be brought in from probably out of Mexico or offshore. When it comes into high value products with labor content, a smaller percentage of the overall cost of the product, that would be more hard to produce on domestic. Sure.
I totally agree. The one thing that really concerns me is when we do get to that new normal, folks have fairly short memories, so when the world stabilizes, shipping stabilizes, and then you have one area of the world that is more cost effective than another, then you'll see a shift, I think, back to those old ways, and then we'll be back in the same situation if something happens of this magnitude in the future beyond that new normal. So we're definitely watching that as well.
I think a couple of things. I think what we will see is definitely further diversification in the supply chain. I don't think that's one thing that really became apparent is that companies can't rely on just one country or even just one region to source their products. So I think that at least as far as our business is concerned, I see still Asia and China being very significant in terms of manufacturing, but they may be, China plus, I think you mentioned too, China plus somewhere else in Central America, as I mentioned before, being a good option. But I did talk quite a bit also about the environmental costs, and that is one thing that we haven't really talked too much about. It's one thing to be considering only your profitability, but I think society has changed quite a bit, at least in the past few years, and companies are increasingly being scrutinized not just about what their profit is, right? Business Roundtable changed their definition of the purpose of a corporation. It's not just to make a profit; it's also about how are you impacting your stakeholders. So when we're looking at the environmental cost of shipping halfway around the world versus what impact that might be if you're only having to ship from somewhere like Mexico or Central America, that could be something that could be worth it to companies to nearshore, is just to reduce that. And then the other thing is we have to look at things like rising labor costs in countries like China. So we're even seeing in our industry, the apparel industry is almost always the first to shift because it's one of the first, manufacturing that kind of really takes place. And so we've seen a big shift out of China actually, and now it is Vietnam, Bangladesh, and then where we'll be next is Ethiopia and Africa, and we're just seeing progression around. So it's not always, just because you were manufacturing in one country beforehand in order to increase your profit, it doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. As their costs, as their labor, goes up, then the profit goes down anyhow. So.
And Jessica makes a great point. Investor relations, we're a publicly traded company. Investor relations are very much diving into ESG or the sustainability message and reliability of that messaging and how important it is. Today's investor relations businesses, those who are big investors, mortgage funds, folks who are retirement plans, high net worth individuals, sovereignty funds, they're making decisions on how to invest on companies that have good ESG or environmental standing and can prove it. So that's going to be a huge impact, certainly over the next 15 to 20 years.
Just now, I forgot to mention the ESG, just from also from a accounting standpoint. So SEC recently, just not too long ago, last month, proposed rules to standardize the climate-related information disclosure, particularly related to the climate-related risk that may materially impact your financial statement. So this is on the public company side, but a lot of private companies start seeing pressure. So, for instance, one of our clients, a private private company, they sell products to their customer in EU. So EU have more stringent ESG rules than US, basically. US is following the EU, right? So there's a lot of things coming into play. And at the same time, FASB, which is the financial reporting standard board, also proposed regulation and discuss how these ESG risks to disclose in the financial. In particular, list some of the items that they are looking at, which is like valuation of your inventory, your environmental obligations, asset retirement obligations, and contingencies. So I just wanted to.
So I think we're almost out of time, and I think the best thing to do at this point is to probably head towards lunch. Because it's an important time, there's a number of students in this room here. Is that right? How many students do we have here? Right. So you see, so I'm a student too, that's why my hand's up. But one of the important things is our panel, and Stacey in particular and others have just invested time to come here, the investment of time to be here. So for the students, these times where we go have lunch and other times, head towards these guys and chat to them and spend a little bit of time, talking to them and asking them a little bit about the career journalists and that as well. It's just unique they didn't get an opportunity to share those, but for the students in 20, 30 years' time, and you'll probably be sitting up here and sharing to the next generation. So I think with this, what we should do is to thank our panel and for their time and investment in coming here, and for their thoughtful response to the questions. Thank you.